Hello and welcome to Media Studies. I'm James Brown. Thanks for joining us. I'm here with Saby Reyes-Kulkarni. How are you, Saby?
I'm wonderful, thank you.
This is we have a wonderful array of subjects, all intertwined in my view, but I think you'll enjoy this show. We're going to start with Tucker on the media. Very interesting point. He just visited Putin, did an interview. For me, the Putin interview is not all that interesting. It seemed like a pretty milquetoast interview to me. I listened to about half of it so far. I was not terribly, it was a basic Tucker interview. But for me, I think his preamble is the most interesting element of this all, largely because that kind of media critique has been made a lot, but not in front of that many people. But we'll get there in a moment. I'm also gonna go in depth on Joe Rogan resigning as he moves firmly into his Howard Stern phase. Essentially, we're moving to this point where Spotify and all of the audio companies have given up on the idea of exclusives, and that's a fascinating turn. The Grammys have made a big rebound. They were up 34%, which I was not expecting. I'd love to hear from our resident music writer on his thoughts on the Grammys, and of course Pitchfork. Even more from Pitchfork. News on the work of Mr. Kulkarni and others has come up in the recent days. But I think we should start with Tucker. I'll allow you to set the table, Mr. Kulkarni. What was your thoughts when you heard that Tucker was going to Russia?
The first thing I did was text you, and then I laughed. It might have been in the opposite order. I'm pretty sure I laughed first, and then texted you. I didn't watch the interview. I haven't watched it yet because there's something about all of this that just feels, I don't know. We're in like this point where entertainment and matters of grave matters of state are so indistinguishable. It just seemed like a big giant performance. I'm going to watch it, but I'm really curious to see what you have to say. And my question for you is just, who is this guy? I know that's broad, but he's obviously super talented, and he's one of those people that like, all right, I left Fox and I can do my own thing. I'm so powerful. I have such a big audience. And like every time he talks, I'm like, man, this guy could be a killer journalist. And yet he's, we've talked about wrestling. To me, he's like one hair shy of a wrestling character. And I find that really unfortunate, but it's funny. But I'm just like, I always feel like he's uncovering great things and then putting spin on them and then doing a little tap dance. So who is he, James? Like, help us understand.
I could go on for hours about this because I do think he's fascinating on a number of levels. I intended to touch on this in my presentation, so I'll hop ahead on and I'll show you what I was intending to show. He's done a number of podcast interviews over the last year since he left Fox, and I thought this was revealing about where he is at this moment in his life, or at least what he wants to show us all, because whether it's the total truth, who knows? So this is an interview he did with the comedian Theo Von. I love Theo Von's show. I love Theo Von. I'm glad Theo Von has blown up.
Likewise.
And this is what Tucker said about leaving Fox and his views sort of evolving.
Isn't my own voice?
Oh, all the time.
Really? was always my own voice, but they're just, you could feel the parameters. I mean, I started in my 20s, mid 20s. I'm now in my mid 50s, so it's been a long time.
Well, you look great for 50s, man.
I'm 54.
Are you really?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
No, isn't that shocking? It's
Yeah.
shocking. I don't feel it. But anyway, but when you're much younger and you've got little kids, I always had a lot of kids just reproduce like a crazy person.
Yeah.
Which I recommend strongly to you. You know, you feel vulnerable and like, you know, you're not allowed to say certain things. And I do think I was never censored, but I self-censored for sure. You know, the war in Iraq breaks out and you're like, maybe it's a good idea. It's not a good idea. And you know it's not a good idea.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But you allow yourself to be convinced because you know it's super unpopular to say it's not a good idea, but it clearly wasn't. War with Iran, not a good idea. I can say that now.
Why do we go along with that consensus a lot of times? What is it that makes us afraid to speak out?
Well, people...
Before I allowed him to keep going, because his answer is really fascinating. Theo Von's not a journalist. That's an amazing follow-up. All right. And I wish more journalists would just make the simple follow-up, because that's really the only question of that moment. Like, okay, your views have changed. You were swallowing your point of view on the world. Why the hell do we do that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I even think he's implying something even broader. I kind of got the sense he was getting at, why do we even want that?
Mm-hmm.
I know he didn't say that, but that's what I was getting at, sort of the edges. Why do we want the people, the voices talking to us, to do that to themselves? Why is there even an appetite for that?
Yeah. Let's hear what he's got to say.
People have a deep need to be part of a group. It's a human need right up there with sex and food and shelter. You know, it's like people want to be connected to other people, which I understand. And I want that too. But that can override reason and common sense very often. So if you're, and a million studies been done on this, but if you're in a group, I mean, everyone experiences, you're in a group full of people and everyone's like, you know, I hate chocolate ice cream. And you're like, I kind of like chocolate ice cream, but you don't say anything about it because people that like chocolate ice cream suck. And you're like, yeah, they kind of suck. Ugh. You know, it's a human thing. And so people go along with stuff that their gut tells them isn't the right thing, but you should never ignore your gut, your instincts, which you inherited from your ancestors, which are encoded in your DNA and which are almost never wrong. If you're with someone and you feel like, God, that person's lying, that person's lying.
Right.
You may not know what about, you don't have X-ray vision into someone's soul, but you can smell the deception on someone. I know that you can. We all can.
Oh, yeah.
Or if you feel danger, you're like, wow, this person poses a threat to me. You're right. You don't know the details. You don't need to know the details. Get away.
Yeah.
And if something's really stupid, like, let's go have a war with Iran. It's like, what?
Yeah.
And I just feel like it's, you know, maybe because of my age and my job, I have a moral obligation to say, I think that's really unwise.
You don't want to.
Do you think he's telling the truth there?
I was just going to ask you, how much does he strike you as the kind of guy who is going to say he hates chocolate ice cream because everybody else in the room expects him to do that? I mean, I'm sure we are all vulnerable to that, I would think, to a degree. But does he seem like someone who really wants to belong to you?
I'll zoom out even further. He's been a part of a club for a very long time, which I also wanted to go into a bit in my presentation, where you kind of have to be a part of you have to run with the herd. So I think to some degree, yes. Him individually, it's an interesting question, and I think it probably varies, but that's part of the world that he's been involved with for most of his life. It is one of the pressures of journalism is agreed upon news judgment. And essentially what news judgment is sort of having the same sense and being around people who have a similar sense of what is news, what is worth attention, and what isn't. What's worth time and investment and research, and what isn't. Because you can't do it for everything. You have to make a choice. You have to run with the herd. That's just a nature as a person who spent a good chunk of his career in a few newsrooms. That's part of what comes with it, is running with a herd. Until you have a show where you are in control of that show, as he was at Fox. Well, his second show at Fox, not his first. Where you have some element of control, then you can make those larger decisions. Unless you rise up to a certain level of an organization and the organization's not going to freak out when you make that decision, then you could choose to sort of veer from the herd.
But isn't that exactly what happened?
Go on.
Isn't that what precipitated his departure from Fox? Didn't he do something or go down certain tracks that angered Rupert Murdoch or whoever was like Murdoch's kid, whichever one was in charge the most?
Yeah, it's James. No, Lachlan's in control, not James. Lachlan is James is the other kid, the other son. Arguably, it's unclear. The timing would tell you that it had something to do with the Dominion voting system. If you look at his statements on that, they were not. There are people who are still employed at Fox that went way further. Maria Bartiromo being one of them, who repeatedly over months and months and months went way further. So the timing would say that that's probably what happened, but I don't think we fully know, because Dominion, if I remember correctly, and my memory could be off, but that there was the ruling on a Friday, and he was not on the air on Monday. And
right, it was very abrupt, wasn't it?
Yeah, and if you watched his last segment, he was eating pizza and was like, "I'll be back Monday."
Right, right.
So you would think those two things are connected. And I'm not denying that they are.
But we don't know. We don't have all the details. Whatever it was, he was expecting to go do his show Monday morning.
Without a doubt.
Something.
Yeah, and the reporting said he was expecting it even that morning. Yeah. So, that's taking this as a frame. I want to go into his statement prior to talking to Putin, because I think that's fascinating in this context of this guy making his larger critique of media coverage. Just take a moment here. There you are. And I just ahead of this, to be clear, I think part of this was, I thought, pretty spot on, and part of this certainly was not.
We're in Moscow tonight. We're here to interview the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin. We'll be doing that soon. There are risks to conducting an interview like this, obviously, so we thought about it carefully over many months. Here's why we're doing it. First, because it's our job. We're in journalism. Our duty is to inform people. 2 years into a war that's reshaping the entire world, most Americans are not informed. They have no real idea what's happening in this region, here in Russia or 600 miles away in Ukraine. But they should know. They're paying for much of it in ways they might not fully yet perceive. The war in Ukraine is a human disaster. It's left hundreds of thousands of people dead, an entire generation of young Ukrainians, and it's depopulated the largest country in Europe. But the long-term effects are even more profound. This war has utterly reshaped the global military and trade alliances, and the sanctions that followed have as well. And in total, they have upended the world economy. The post-World War II economic order, the system that guaranteed prosperity in the West for more than 80 years, is coming apart very fast, and along with it, the dominance of the US dollar. These are not small changes. They are history-altering developments. They will define the lives of our grandchildren. Most of the world understands this perfectly well. They can see it. Ask anyone in Asia or the Middle East what the future looks like. And yet the populations of the English-speaking countries seem mostly unaware. They think that as nothing has really changed. And they think that because no one has told them the truth. Their media outlets are corrupt. They lie to their readers and viewers. And they do that mostly by omission. For example, since the day the war in Ukraine began, American media outlets have spoken to scores of people from Ukraine, and they have done scores of interviews with Ukrainian President Zelensky. We ourselves have put in a request for an interview with Zelensky, and we hope he accepts. But the interviews he's already done in the United States are not traditional interviews. They are fawning pep sessions specifically designed to amplify Zelensky's demand that the U.S. enter more deeply into a war in Eastern Europe and pay for it. That is not journalism. It is government propaganda. Propaganda of the ugliest kind, the kind that kills people. At the same time, our politicians and media outlets have been doing this, promoting a foreign leader like he's a new consumer brand. Not a single Western journalist has bothered to interview the president of the other country involved in this conflict, Vladimir Putin. Most Americans have no idea why Putin invaded Ukraine or what his goals are now. They've never heard his voice. That's wrong. Americans have a right to know all they can about a war they're implicated in, and we have the right to tell them about it because we are Americans too. Freedom of speech is our birthright. We were born with the right to say what we believe. That right cannot be taken away no matter who is in the White House. But they're trying anyway. Almost 3 years ago, the Biden administration illegally spied on our text messages and then leaked the contents to their servants in the news media. They did this in order to stop a Putin interview that we were planning. Last month, we're pretty certain they did exactly the same thing once again. But this time, we came to Moscow anyway. We are not here because we love Vladimir Putin. We are here because we love the United States, and we want it to remain prosperous and free. We paid for this trip ourselves. We took no money from any government or group, nor are we charging people to see the interview. It is not behind a paywall. Anyone can watch the entire thing, shot live to tape and unedited, on our website, tuckercarlson.com. Elon Musk, to his great credit, has promised not to suppress or block this interview once we post it on his platform, X, and we're grateful for that. Western governments, by contrast, will certainly do their best to censor this video on other less principled platforms because that's what they do. They are afraid of information they can't control. But you have no reason to be afraid of it. We are not encouraging you to agree with what Putin may say in this interview, but we are urging you to watch it. You should know as much as you can. And then, like a free citizen and not a slave, you can decide for yourself. Thanks.
All right. All right. I'm gonna stop this and just meditate on this.
See, this is the thing. Why are we laughing? I know you have a clear idea, and so do I. But
This was an amazing sales pitch. This is masterful marketing. Great journalism. Who knows, right? You know, I think it's eye of the beholder. But as a marketing pitch, hey, I did this thing that everybody wants to stop me from doing, and I want you to know the truth. I'm telling you the truth. These people want to stop you. The government's going to stop you. Go to my website right now and sign up to watch my show.
I know. When you say it like that, it sounds like an infomercial, right? When you condense it just the way you said it. See, like, I can't ever watch this guy without laughing. And that's why I'm wary of him, because he's a great orator, and you can tell he
He's
could
still-
be a fucking amazing journalist. He is an amazing journalist. Actually, I think we have to be fair and call it that. And yet there's this I don't know, P.T. Barnum kind of fucking thing about him that I think both makes him more interesting and draws attention and makes me curious, but then it also makes me like, ah, man, why is this a dog and pony show? You know, it's almost like he can't keep a straight face. Like watching that video, I expect him to start laughing at any moment.
I think like part of it is the nature of the age that he is in, where as a journalist or anyone who wants to do any level of journalism, what is required of you now is not what was required of you in the past. He can't simply go on a platform and talk and expect it all to come together and be profitable and be paid handsomely. He was literally just jettisoned from one of the largest media platforms in the world. He has to build the boat and then captain the boat and get people to want to come on the boat with him. So I think that's one part of it. Another part of it is just his manner. I think the guy is a masterful, like media personality. He is really good at being on camera. And you know, they talk about making love to the camera when you go through that kind of training for TV, you know, and sort of like making you want to engage with a person when you're in front of it. And he does that incredibly well. He also is not afraid to make, and somewhere along the way, with his Fox show, he got to the point where he just was not afraid to make an outlandish claim with a straight face. And some of them are certainly well worth thinking about. He had an excellent monologue that he made on Nixon that was fascinating. And it was just a different perspective on Nixon. And at the time, in most of it, pretty correct. You know, it doesn't mean that Watergate was cool. It means that like, hey, that's just a different worldview. And at a certain point along the way, maybe because, you know, of what he told Theo Vaughn there, he felt like he had less to lose. His kids were all grown up. He's got a ton of money. Fuck it.
And he can clearly command a large audience. I don't know, when do you think he realized that he could step out on his own and be fine?
Probably not till it happened.
Okay. Because I mean, clearly he's breaking the internet. I mean, he's probably.
Yeah.
I mean, is he one of the biggest internet figures in the world now?
I'd say so, and that spoke to another element of my my presentation that I had planned. Let me go there, because I think he's a massive personality, and certainly one of the biggest ones in the world.
Let me just offer this. This is what I thought of this morning. He is the trickster. It's not somebody who plays tricks, but the archetype of the trickster. There's something about him that's like playfully.
That's fascinating.
I don't know.
Go on.
Rearranging our understanding of reality for better and for worse, just for the sheer joy of rearranging things. And you said something like about on his take on Nixon, which I haven't seen, but like he's very, very convincing, makes very lucid and sober points that are almost always worth exploring. And you're like, oh wow, that takes guts and that's an interesting take. but I always feel like there's a little bit of like insanity mixed in there on purpose, and I can't tell to what degree he believes himself. There's like an almost like a joy in just tearing everything down, I think.
I do think that does seem to be part of his perspective, where he is sort of taking glee at taking shots of this community that he's been a part of for the last 2-3 decades. I mean, I think I first heard about him when I was a kid, so I'd say probably 1990s. And I think there is a trickster vibe definitely to his perspective and his approach, and I think it is part of why he's done well.
Sure, it's very entertaining. It's very engaging.
He doesn't
But
feel like
he doesn't feel like what?
he doesn't feel like other broadcasters.
No, but I always find myself uncertain and even a little worried about whether what I just watched is believed by the person who's saying it. And I find that worrisome and a little uncomfortable, while
Matt,
also very entertaining.
Hey, Matt, we'll get to Joe Rogan later. we got a commenter on that one.
Nice.
Yeah. Just to get to your point about Tucker Carlson being as massive as he is, if you are watching the video of this, you are watching a screenshot of a breakdown of Tucker Carlson's interviews, many of which have got astronomical numbers on X. Here's the thing that I would say. Here's the thing that I would say about his numbers. I would not take what he's doing on X at full value. When you look at how X calculates its own numbers, which I also have here, this is from their terms and conditions. Multiple views may be counted if you view a post more than once, but not all views are unique. For example, you could look at a post on the web and then on your phone, and then it will count as 2 views. Also, if you're scrolling through a feed in the way that X is structured, simply seeing a post on a feed is a view. So, yes, it's buzzy. Yes, I do think his audience is bigger than it was on cable TV. Yes, I do think he's one of the bigger online stars in the world. But no, I don't think he got 420 million viewers. He got 420 million views.
Mm-hmm.
Also, if you took me and Putin, the Putin interview, I listened to about a half hour of it. Then I went away. Then I came back and listened to another half hour. That was counted as 2. I doubt many people sat there for 2 hours listening to him talk to Vladimir Putin. I don't believe that. That doesn't sound right in my head.
But let me just counter with this. Even if those numbers are 10% in truth of what is being reported, that's still
massive.
I mean, dwarfs what he was doing on TV. Let's just chop all those numbers, multiply them by 0.1, so 10% of what we're seeing.
Yeah.
I mean, that, holy smokes, man.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, versus doing 3 million on average on Fox News. So if you most people weren't watching don't watch a show 5 straight days a week.
I was just going to ask you about that. Yeah.
So that 3 million number is probably more like 20. You know, like it's an average over the course of an hour where they get to 3 million. So for an average show, like if you look at the minute by minute ratings, as you can find in some cases, you can see that your peak could be at the very beginning or maybe the end of your show, where you could easily be close to 10 million, but your bottom might be closer to 2. You know what I mean? It's not an apples to apples comparison, but you're absolutely right. Look, I think his profile has gone through the roof as he sort of has moved into this realm.
So basically, he's the Shannon Sharp Club Shay Shay of news media, going from a network to the internet.
It's very similar. Very, very similar. Very, very similar approach. I mean, that's a great comparison, honestly. I also want to move to another element of his presentation that I found bullshit on. And Christiane Amanpour said it best. All right. This was her reaction within minutes of this thing coming out. Does Tucker really think that journalists have been trying to interview President Putin every day since his full-scale invasion of Ukraine?
Here's what I would answer. Here's where I would counter her. Sorry about that, but
yeah,
I'll let you keep reading the tweet. But
it's absurd. We'll continue to ask for an interview just as we have for years now.
Okay, here's why I think. Here's where I would counter that. If I'm Putin, I'm not going on Amanpour on their show. Why the fuck would I do that? Why, when 90% of the journalists like affiliated with networks in the West are going to put a spin on that interview that I know is not in line with my vision. Now, if he was savvy enough, and I'm not saying he isn't savvy, I don't know anything about Vladimir Putin, he would do it on purpose and lead them by the nose to give an impression that he wants to give them. But who is going to give you a more fair shake, Tucker Carlson or Christiane Amanpour?
I tend to agree with you, and I tend to say that's the same reason why Zelensky hasn't talked to Tucker.
Right. He'd rather fucking be hanging out with Sean Penn.
Yeah. And peace to Matt. Matt, you're in England? Very cool. You're watching us from England. Awesome.
Nice. That's awesome. JB's got international reach.
Yeah, look, I think honestly, they are skeptical. And I think, and I've done this both on the communication side and on the media side. When it comes to one-on-one interviews, if you are of any high regard, any level of power, you're going to cherry pick who you talk to.
You're going to vet your requests.
Yeah.
Or your people are going to even do that, pre-screen them for you.
Yeah, without a doubt. And you're going to say, hey, you're going to go to this person and you're going to say, hey, we don't think you should talk to this person, but hey, this person over here, cool with us. So I think that's probably what happened. That's probably why they're not talking to Amanpour and a lot of other journalists who I'm sure are reaching out and trying to talk with Putin, as they have in the past. I mean, Barbara Walters has done it. Dan Rather's done it.
There's been lots of examples in the wake of this happening, and then a bunch of people saying that Tucker should be brought up on sedition charges, and
it's ridiculous. I mean, it's
right.
Like we talked to Hitler. I mean,
I saw that example.
Yeah. We talked to the Viet Cong. It's like there's no, we talked to Saddam Hussein. Come on. It's the Shah of Iran, Ahmadinejad. Despots across the world have been interviewed by American media. Even people, I believe even Milosevic, even when we were bombing Bosnia, I believe, had an interview. Like, look, it's not a new concept on any level.
No, and don't those guys typically love the camera?
Yeah.
Being on camera. I mean, don't
Your
they
personality? Yeah, absolutely.
and did Fidel Castro was interviewed too, wasn't he?
Yeah.
After his
Without a
ascent. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
but
I-
aren't some of the same people in Christiane Amanpour's like not her specific circle, but like her the people on that side of things, right? Like isn't it a lot of journalists who are calling for him? I don't know who is calling for Tucker to be like, scolded or even formally charged as if what he's doing is such a betrayal. Aren't a lot of those journalists?
Some of them are journalists. There's a mix of journalists and just people who are ideologically driven on this one.
Sure.
Like I think so. Yes, I'd say that's part of it. There's been some governments. I know there was this whole talk about the whole sanctions with the EU, which is ridiculous. But that's certainly part of the conversation as well. This is where all that criticism is coming from.
Well, let me ask you. So of the people who would get all huffy about what Tucker just did, talking to Putin.
PC
I
Barnum,
wonder. Yeah, I wonder how many of those people were outraged watching Sean Penn and Bono. Like, I don't know if Bono specifically talked to Zelensky, but I know Sean Penn met with him and it's like absurd. Like, it was so surreal. It was like performance art. It was something the people who made the movie Network never could have dreamed reality would get this absurd.
Yeah.
When like Sean Penn was crying and hugging Zelensky and giving him his fucking Oscar. Like, I wonder how many of those people would be like upset about that. And my guess is not many.
Yeah. I haven't heard from one. Like, I think it's very, look, I think with this war in particular, there has been a lining up, and like we've chose a side that one is absolutely right and one is absolutely wrong. And I'm not saying we necessarily haven't even chosen the wrong side. I mean, I think there's an element of this where hey, look, I don't think we should be invading. That not we, but Russia should be invading Ukraine. But in terms of how public sentiment and media sentiment, there was clearly like we have made a judgment call that this X is right and the other one's wrong.
Well, I mean, first of all, it's a more complex situation. It's more nuanced, as you know.
Yeah.
Even when you've got people like Chris Hedges, just coming out and saying, "Well, Putin actually has a fair grievance," right? Like, I mean, that
because of the expansion of NATO, right?
Sure, and also the neo-Nazi element in the Ukrainian government, and how what was happening in the Donbass with Russian, ethnically Russian people there. You talked about this right after this war broke out. How many people? Because I believe you were still working at XXI at the time.
No, USA Today.
Okay, right. Okay. You talked about how in the wake of COVID, with people conditioned to just go along with, lockstep with whatever was put in front of them, all these Ukrainian flags went up in people's homes. I noticed that in my neighborhood.
Without a doubt. Like, it was right on cue. Like,
it was
culturally, I think largely, we had there was this sort of like neck snapping where all of a sudden, like, oh yeah, we must follow this now. And I felt like, and I still feel this way. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I have a fair amount of knowledge, probably more than an average person, but I don't know enough. I don't have enough conviction on this to have the need to like have, whether it's a Ukrainian flag or signs. I saw bumper stickers, all this stuff just happened immediately. It became a cottage industry instantly to to be to be anti-Russian.
And it was eerie, unsettling, and ridiculous, and I thought hilarious too. And I saw it in so many friends. So many people changed their social media avatars to
Without a
have
doubt,
the
yeah.
Ukrainian flag and
Same here.
on them. I was just like, oh my god. And you pointed this out also, how the media just decided overnight to change Kiev to Kyiv.
Yes, that happened personally to me. Like I was doing shows, and all of a sudden there was, I believe it came from, was it from the AP, where there was like a quick correction where like Kiev, which has been pronounced Kiev for my entire life, all of a sudden we were told to say it as Kyiv. And it
Which-
was like it came down from on high, and then all of a sudden you look around and like everybody is pronouncing Kiev, and it's like, and because if I'm remembering the rationale correctly, Kiev is the Russian pronunciation, and Kyiv is the Ukrainian pronunciation.
Right. Is there sort is
That one, but I think that's what happened.
And what was really happening, as I'm sure you picked up on, is it's like using these things as tuning forks to get everybody on the same frequency and just chiming in harmony, all pointing in the same direction. It was such an obvious fucking, oh, we're pronouncing this Kyiv now because we've all heard the word Kiev all our lives. So we either have feelings on it or indifference, frankly, right? And if you change the word, you can now foster sympathy, and you can present it in a certain light, as if Kyiv is this victimized place, and oh my God, isn't this? It's very, it's like all of a sudden over the last few years, I feel like I woke up and ended up in a kindergarten classroom, and that's even maybe not giving enough credit to kindergarten teachers, right? But like the way stories are told and the level of manipulation is so obvious. So that's what your boy Tucker's talking about. But then, he got to have his little P.T. Barnum come to my website.
And just from our commenter, our pal Matt, he saw this in the UK immediately too. Like this was, I think the Western, as I think Tucker said, well, the English speaking countries all sort of just got in lockstep that we are essentially starting another, hopefully, Cold War again. And it got really, really kind of mind numbing. I want to move further into Tucker's statement because I think that's the most interesting thing, and I think we kind of have anyway. I thought that was like the clear, the interesting thing at the most basic level. The news you consume is a lie the stealthiest and most insidious kind. Facts have been withheld on purpose, along with proportion and perspective. You're being manipulated.
But what he's not telling you is, hey, but now buy my snake oil version of the news, this special ointment that'll cure your athlete's foot from insidious lies of the news, and buy mine instead.
Yeah, this is where we're in sync on this. Look, you can't, this is what's most interesting about his presentation of this Putin interview. He released the whole interview, uncut. It's 2.5 hours. It's in podcast form. All right. That's not generally how news works. You've contributed to news publications. I've written and worked behind the scenes in news publications for he's on and off over the last decade and a half. What you get is a distilled shape version of reality. All right. So you could argue, yes, it is sort of, there are elements that are being withheld from whatever news story you see. I'm not giving you everything. The question is, should we be? And with technology as it is, I think there's a lot of arguments that we should be giving out more information, that we should be releasing entire interviews with both the questions and the answers. That we should offer a varnished view and an uncut view.
Well, and there's also huge indicators that there's an appetite for it as well.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking ethically from a journalism perspective. I'm speaking
Yeah.
from like an audience building
Oh.
perspective that people want it. So
Yes. Yeah, I think as we sort of have to build new forms of media, you have to take that into account. That hey, there's some people who just want the quick hit and that's it, but there's a lot of people who are like, hey, I'm not sure I trust you. In order to build that trust in this era, I think you have to, hey, be able to, hey, let's post the whole thing. Journalism is a filter. It is a filter that's gotten increasingly ideological. Tucker was just a part of one of those organizations. He's trying to have a new one now, right?
Yeah, and he's acting like he's presenting himself as if, oh, my coffee is not filtered, which is total bullshit.
Totally. It is. He is filtering the world through his frame of conservatism. I think he'd argue what kind of conservatism it is. You could call it whatever you want to call it.
Wouldn't he say he's a classic liberal? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I think he would call himself a classical liberal. But I guess in our American frame, we would call it whether it's MAGAism or whatever it is. Was it populist nationalism is one phrase I've put it. So he is showing the world through that frame, much like other journalists are showing the world through their frame. My argument that I make all the time, all right, is that we just should be honest about the frames.
Yeah, you and I, right. You and I talked about this the last time I was on. Right. We don't mind the filter. In fact, just print on the filter your brand. Like, you know what I mean? And we'll buy it if we want that flavor. And I think where you and I differ, though, is you and I will go. I think you and I both enjoy different brands of coffee filters, not necessarily just the ones we agree with. We just kind of like the taste of different ones sometimes.
Yeah.
Because we're aware of what the filter is. I think what's disingenuous about what Tucker's doing, what you're getting at, he's trying to pass it off like, no, this is the straight, uncut, dope coffee beans picked straight from the fucking fair trade, right in the crate, like, and I'm scooping it to you straight from that. And it's like, and where does he get off doing that, having just served at one of those media outlets for 30 years?
It's a good question. Charles, can you join? You want to join us, Charles? How you feel about that one, Sabi?
I'm fine with it, and I do think this makes more sense to follow your original order to go into Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
After this, and so I'll stick around, and
Yeah. Not at this point, Charles, but stick around. I'll try to slip you in. Send you a link. I don't want to put it in the general chat of YouTube. Send me drop in an email. Maybe we'll do it that way. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so to be honest, this is where we get back to the news judgment question. The environments that exist, the environments that I've worked in, they are looking for people who have an agreement on what's news and what's not, what we should show the public and what we shouldn't. That an agreement on and seeking out people who they feel like they could shape the judgment of.
Well, to borrow from what you have said in the past, seeking out people who they feel they can shape, but people who already have it in them to be amenable to their worldview without them having to contrive. I'm paraphrasing you, obviously you didn't put it this way. But because I would ask you this for years, are they sending memos and having meetings with people and telling them we have to do this? And you're like, no, it's more subtle than that.
Yeah.
That's what you told me, right? Like, does that sound familiar to you? That like seeking out people who they can shape, but who don't end up feeling like they were shaped because they were already geared a certain way.
Yeah. And I think there's a reason why, Matt. I think there's a reason why increasingly we're seeing, especially in elite news organizations, more journalists come from fewer organizations, fewer schools. They're only taking people from a smaller percentage of organizations, and they're only bringing in people with a certain type of experience. And as people rise through the ranks, you end up shaping everything, and you end up with a place full of people who are sharing one perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how these organizations are built. That's how Fox News is built from the right. And that's how a place like NPR is built from the left. There are elements that are that you could argue that are positive, right? Like I think both. I think you're that from a place like NPR, you're not gonna get you will get that 30 you'll get 30 minutes on masturbation, as was an NPR segment earlier this week.
You just sent me the link to that.
Yes. Yeah, and you'll get it from a perspective of boy, like, how did people come to this conclusion to just join this world? Charles, I'm gonna be wild here. I'll just drop it in there. Why not?
Who is Charles Kyle? Do you know?
No, I have no idea who this person is.
Okay, well,
Yeah. So
we're making live streaming media studies history here.
yeah. Charles, it's dropped in the chat. Click it. I can add you in a bit. So I think I lost track of my point.
Well, you were saying, you're talking about how the people who media platforms, these older traditional ones seek, they seek people who are from certain backgrounds that are, and this is not the term you used, but that they can groom into becoming sort of vectors or loudspeakers of their chosen worldview. But they're doing that because they're picking people from a certain sphere who are going to slot into that worldview.
Yeah, without a doubt,
more readily.
And I think if you're a Fox News, you're going to pick people who are going to be who you believe are slanted your way. That's why your guy Will Chain was brought in, and and if you're NPR or if you're CNN, you're going to sign Audie Cornish from NPR because her coming from NPR over a long period of time, she has one perspective. So. Charles, I'm gonna bring you on for a second here. If you're I can boot you, so be careful.
Can and will.
Yeah. What's up, Charles? Charles, what's up?
Hey.
What do you have to say on the topic?
I forgot what the topic was.
Okay, so we were talking about the media, and we're talking about Tucker and his critique on the media, and what was going on from and how media organizations are built. So you can take it anywhere you want. You okay there, Charles? What's going on, man?
Oh no, please do not kidnap me.
We can hear you.
Why are you kidnapping me?
All right, Charles. We're gonna pull you out.
Wait.
Charles, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, you have anything to add?
Oh, well, we might be about to get pranked here because there was some weird picture
Yeah, of
Bob Marley, but there was something else fading into the picture. I don't know what that was.
yeah, it looked like maybe his head. All right, Charles. We're gonna pull
It
you
was
out.
a dick.
What?
That fading in or whatever. It was a dick.
Yeah. See. So yeah. Look. Yeah.
All right, whatever. Okay, so look, it's kick guess. You're off into outer space, Charles. Look, yeah. So I think both these groups, and as media companies are built, they surround it with people who fit the narrative that they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's how these things are structured. That's how Tucker is structuring his own world that he's building. And yes, Matt, you're right. You did tell us, you did warn me about bringing it in Charles. So it's so with that, I'll give you the floor to end this one.
I mean, I think you pretty much summed it up. I don't know what else I would say about that, except, well, here's what I would say about that. People like Tucker and you have Joe Rogan on your slate end up falling into a position where they can easily claim, well, no, we're presenting you with an alternative to that. And I think audiences have to be more savvy and understand that even independent online, because he's like presenting himself on like X. On Elon Musk has tried to come off as like a champion of free speech, and it comes off as really hollow. Yes, he has platformed people who've been taken off by the usual suspects, but he's got his own. There are people who have trouble being heard on X as well, right?
Mhm.
It's just whatever his judgment happens to be. I think audiences have to understand that whenever you're being sold this idea that, hey, here's the alternative, here's the uncut stuff, it's filtered.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. And with that, I'll move into Rogan real quick. I'm not gonna go crazy deep on this one, but I think that's part of his appeal. Is that what he's giving you is going to be different than you will in traditional media. Like I've gone back, I was listening to his Aaron Rodgers interview from a couple of days ago, and I went back a couple of different times. And Aaron went places that Rogan didn't want to go. Aaron went to Tartaria, which was surprising, deep internet conspiracy land.
I didn't see that part, but I saw the part where he addressed the Jimmy Kimmel thing. I saw that one snippet.
Yeah. So
I thought Aaron Rodgers came off very, very well.
Yeah, in spots I thought he certainly did, and in other ways he did go a little Fruit Loops at times. But to sum it up, Joe Rogan resigns with Spotify, and this is the end of the audio exclusive. Spotify is paying Joe Rogan $250 million to not be exclusive with Spotify.
Good work if you can get it, right?
Right. JRE averages between 12 and 20 million listeners. And let's talk about this non-exclusive agreement. Rogan is going to return to YouTube. He's going to return to Apple Podcasts. I believe he's already back on Apple Podcasts now. And what Spotify has done, and I'm assuming they've made the calculation that selling ads on Rogan is more profitable than bringing people to the Spotify platform just to listen to Rogan. Which is a total sea change. This is a company that gave out $100 million to Michelle and Barack Obama to be exclusive. This is a group that threw money at Princess Harry and Meghan Markle. This is a group that threw money all over the place for exclusive, going back to Joe Budden.
Didn't they give Jamel Hill a show too?
Jamel Hill is another example of it. They threw all kinds of money around and they came to the conclusion that this ain't worth it. After burning through about $1 billion of that money that they spent on exclusives. All right. Okay. Call Her Daddy, which is the second largest podcast exclusive on Spotify. It was a Barstool show that was brought over, and Barstool retained the rights to sell stuff for her and to produce the show, but allowed Spotify to have her exclusively. They also they took the exclusive tag off that show too. In this case, both those shows have a few things in common. They both go into very risky content. Call Her Daddy gets really, really not so much profane, but sexually explicit. Lots of sexually explicit talk. Rogan, of course, will go deep into vaccines. They'll go deep into places where a lot of other shows won't go. And I think they both get a ton of money up front and a safe haven if Apple or YouTube decides to pawn them. And we're going to see in the next year, 2 years, how much bigger his audience can actually be. Because remember, that 12 to 20 million average, somewhere in there, was just on one platform. You put them back in the YouTube world, you put them back in the Apple Podcasts and everywhere else. Are we going to look at 30 million an episode in a couple of in a couple of years or a couple of months even? It's hard to say. It's just a guess at this point. And just to put in comparison,
Well,
go ahead.
This is a lot like ESPN signing McAfee and letting him do his show on his own channel too.
Yeah, it is a lot like that. I totally agree there. That it is not it is an admission that, hey, this guy has access to stuff that we can't get our hands on.
Mm-hmm. And we're better off not trying to contain this brand.
Yeah.
Because the brand is bigger than us.
Yes. Which is a hard question. Let me, we got a new question from the chat here. Will Joe Rogan be doing exclusive debates on Spotify? Yes. Joe Rogan will no longer be exclusive on Spotify. If you go to Apple Podcasts right now, you can find his feed. If you go to other pod feeders, you can find his feed. He'll be on YouTube in a couple of weeks.
But wouldn't Spotify put it in their new arrangement to then be able to siphon some of the profits from those other
Likely.
avenues.
Likely, that is part of the agreement. Part of the agreement is that not only he'll be able to they're going to run his ads.
Right. So
So
it's not merely a concession. It's also like, well, hey, let's get our hands in that.
this is that they must believe that they will be more profitable that way, which tells you something about this whole last decade of, hey, we're going to be exclusive on this platform kind of logic.
Well, maybe exclusivity in media is totally gone, or is it going the way of the dinosaur? Maybe
I,
everyone.
I tend to agree with you.
I mean, maybe everyone who makes it to a certain level of visibility is going to be doing so by having their hand in a number of pots, being platformed on a number of networks or channels or platforms, and then also having like different little sub brands of what they do. Right. So you got your one show with this person, your one show with this other person, your one show where you go to the network and appear on the air a couple times a week, all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, you're getting back to the whole McAfee setup. McAfee he has a daily show that he still owns, but is licensed by ESPN. He has a deal with WWE where he appears on their programming as one of their announcers. He has a third deal with ESPN where he appears on College Game Day, and he's got autonomy in a lot of ways. He's able to have to go and do basically what he wants, and to stick his toe into that world. Your guy Jalen Rose did a similar thing toward the is he still with ESPN? I don't think he is, right?
No.
Yeah, but toward the end of his ESPN run, he had a New York Post show.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, where he was doing more entertainment kind of shows. And then at the same time he had to deal with ESPN. I think we're going to see more of that with these big outlets. I think it's going to be harder to be exclusive. That cats like Stephen A. Cats like Shannon Sharp is another great example. Shannon has the ESPN deal, and he has several of his own podcasts, the Nightcap and Club Shay Shay, and he's not locked in to that world. I think that creative people, on-air people, are going to be more like free agents going forward because they're getting too expensive, for one. There's a story that I'm not going into deeply today that I will in the future, that CNN is giving up on their morning show, basically. They're no longer going to fight for it. And what we're seeing as they do that, and over the last few years, is this network deciding that, hey, we don't need to pay our anchors $5 million. We'll just go with cheaper people. And we're going to attract around the same audience. Like, why are we paying them this money to be exclusively here?
Well, and also I think that their understanding, like in the traditional network world, they are starting to understand not only are they not able to build people who become online brands, they're not as able to build people like that anymore. But then the people, but then the people who that's a good point. But then the people who do step in and want to dance with them, and they're like, I'm already an online brand. I think they're starting to realize that if they try to contain that, they're actually going to end up hurting both that person's brand and their own. So just let them run wild, do their thing, and we'll reap the rewards. That's basically what you're saying. Spotify, that's the calculus Spotify's doing with Rogan.
Yeah. And I think it's becoming the norm. And I think that's what we're going to see more and more.
And just in the overview, because you brought up the Putin interview being 2.5 or whatever, over 2 hours. Companies will pay to have access to put these content creators' work on their platforms.
I think, yes. I think you nailed it, Matt. I think that's what's going to happen more. What's going to happen is that, you know, small fries like myself here, we build ourselves up. They license access to us, and we maintain our world out here. It used to be, hey, build yourself up, or hey, go inside these world and rise up.
And climb up. Yeah.
And then you become exclusively the property of said company. Not so much anymore. But
So,
at least short term.
so the people at places like ESPN who are homegrown
Hmm.
must be thinking, or their personal advisors or whatever must be telling them, listen, you've got to try to find a way to broaden your reach and create a brand that will stand on its own outside of here, I would think. So if you're like a Mina
Without a doubt.
Kimes,
Without a doubt. She's a
Don't
great
you have-
example.
don't you have a manager whispering in your ear saying, listen,
Without her agents no doubt are saying it, because you would look at the landscape for someone like Amina Kimes, and you would look at the Golics. You look at Jalen. You look at Trey Wingo. And we're just looking at the last couple of years of people who have been on there. They made nice money for a long time with them, and they were just discarded. Todd McShay is another one,
hmm,
you know, built inside this world
mhm.
and then just discarded. And if you're in your mid 30s, what? Like discarded, like you have a long way to go, right? You have a long life to live. Michelle Beadle's another one. You could go on for ages.
Well, wouldn't you say that sort of Dan Patrick and Rich Eisen and Dan Lebitard are examples of that? Maybe not quite discarded, but
Not exactly, but discarded, because Dan Patrick and Dan Lebitard, Dan Patrick and Rich Eisen all left on their own for different reasons, but they all left on their own. But yes, of building. Hey, these are the successful ones. They either went to some place where they could be top of the walk, or they built their own pirate ship.
or your boy Bill Simmons is
That's another example.
definitely discarded.
Yeah, definitely discard it. And I think that's why, you know, in our previous talk, we talked about building your own Juggalo camp, and that's where we're back here. Surely what's beneficial for your freedom is to talk about what you want through your real viewpoint, if it's what people want.
Well, surely that's beneficial. I'm just going to clarify Matt's.
Yeah.
Surely that's beneficial for your freedom to talk about what you want, and through your real viewpoint, it's what people want.
Yeah.
Clearly. And so this goes back to the point I was trying to make about Rogan. Would a 2.5 or whatever 2+ hour interview with Putin, would anybody have even found that conceivable if not for what Joe Rogan brought to media? Isn't Joe Rogan the person, I've always understood him, you correct me if I'm wrong, I've always understood him as the person that disproved the notion that our attention spans were so destroyed that we couldn't even concentrate on something more than 2 minutes, much less 3 fucking hours. Isn't he the one that showed that that's the opposite is true?
Yeah, I'd say so in a digital sense. In the digital sense, he certainly proved that. He proved that that people, because what we're seeing on YouTube, especially where most of his numbers are visual, is an average. Like, we're not seeing a pure number there. It's not a so like and we're not seeing the duration of listens. But as his podcast got longer, as he got, I think, stronger as a
Interviewer?
host,
Mhm.
an interviewer, I think you're absolutely right. He proved that yes, you can structure a show where you offer an unvarnished, you know, very simple setup, and people will stay with it. You don't need segment after segment after segment. I say that
Yeah,
on a
sir.
show that has segment after segment after segment.
Well, but I mean, here we are,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's pretty amazing. And
Yeah.
the thing that I would say to Matt is what we're saying though is that Tucker, I don't think, is giving us always his real viewpoint. That's my sense. He's giving us a sort of brand of a viewpoint.
I don't know that I totally agree with that. I think Tucker is giving. I think some of it he truly believes.
Sure, but there's something sort of tailored about it to me that just or stylized, right?
Okay. Stylized for sure.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, stylized.
It's like my viewpoint is this color suit or something. I like wearing a gray suit. But then Tucker turns it into like Cam Newton's version of that suit.
Yeah.
You know?
With the fedora and
and it's selling us this somewhat exaggerated or
yeah.
something like
Here-
something that triggers people one way or the other.
But I think yes, you could attribute that, and I think correctly, to him. But that's also true over most opinionists that you hear.
Sure. However, I think Theo Von, I know Theo Von's not an opinionist, but I do get the sense, and I hope this doesn't change, that you are seeing the real item with him. That he's not actually contriving a persona and performing that persona.
Mhm.
He fell into this just being genuine. I hope I'm not wrong. I hope I'm not being naive, but to me, this disproves what you've always insisted, that everybody is, what's the term you've used? Do you say everybody's performing to a degree? I can't remember what the word is, but I feel yes, he's performing in the sense that he's showing up, right? Just like somebody who plays in a basketball game, quote unquote, performs. But there's nothing unnatural or amplified about his presentation, and that's very refreshing. I think to Matt's point, I do think people are craving that more these days. I don't know if it can do as big numbers as Tucker Carlson. In fact, I think maybe we're moving to your microbrewed model, where super authentic, like hyper authenticity, there is a market share for it, but a small and dedicated market share for it.
And
I wonder.
I think I'm also agreeing with Matt. His latest comment, which is from what I know about Tucker, which isn't much. I believe he's 70% on board, but since he left Fox, he is finding his way. I do think he is remixing himself for the online marketplace.
Yes, you can see that in his intro.
Yeah. And the fact that he even did an intro and that it was under 5 minutes. You saw that in his interview with Ice Cube, where it was shortened, it was stylized, it was he made it for the internet. And I think he is sort of finding himself. Now, 70% on board. I'm not sure what you mean by that, Matt, but I do think about 70%, 7 out of 10 are the things that come out of his mouth. I'm fairly certain I would say that's roughly where I would land that he probably believes.
Yeah, but the other 30% is like this weird spike of provocation that to me just feels like somebody pushing buttons. And you said he makes love to the camera. I don't think he's making love to the camera. I think he's making love to the sense of conviction that he's good at projecting, because he always sounds like he's kind of scolding when he's talking. I mean, are we really going to let America go down to... It's like he's making love to what comes off as conviction, but to me seems like a bluster. That's my...
Yeah,
impression.
I think we're kind of in the same
We are.
ballpark.
We are,
of-
but
of this there.
totally, but I can never quite tell where the line is. It's like somewhere between what Matt is saying, somewhere around 70, but I'm never quite sure. And that's what makes
Yeah.
him intriguing, but also frustrating to me.
It's a performance, clearly.
Yeah.
Let me slide over to the Grammys. Okay, let's see. Ugh. Okay, it is blank. Okay. I don't know why that is blank. Okay, so about 16 million viewers watch the Grammys on average. That's the most watched Grammys since 2020. The Grammys were up 34% year over year. That's a giant jump. It's one of the few award shows that are on an upward trajectory. And I am struggling with why. It's a good, it's sort of this, it was always unique as an award show to me in that it is a show where you have actual performances.
Mhm.
And maybe it's just, you had the moments like the fast car moment with,
Tracy Chapman.
Chris Chapman and Luke Combs, Luke and Taylor Swift is there, and you have all this sort of pomp and circumstance, and you're actually seeing what people do. You don't really see that at the Tonys. You don't really see that at the at the Oscars.
Unless somebody gets
But
slapped.
until yeah. But until recent years, you really didn't see it was sliding like the other award shows are. And now we have a rebound. And I've been trying to figure out whether this is a momentary shift or an anomaly, or whether there's something about music right now and the power of music right now that is resonating more broadly culturally than in previous eras. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to you, Mr. Music Writer, man.
Well, I was just going to ask you. I mean, can we really say something's an anomaly if it's been going up each year over a 4-year period? That's more like a trend, right?
It hasn't gone up each year
Okay.
over a
Okay.
4-year period. It's the biggest jump since then.
Okay. Okay. I'll be honest with you. I have no idea. I have never given the Grammys any thought, and I find them ridiculous. Although I will, I don't just want to. I'm interested in your topic for sure, and want to sort of drill down on what you're getting to. But I've always found them to be useless. The performances, though, that is interesting. The live performance aspect of it, like when Metallica was on there, and this was ages ago now, and the Rollins band, and you can just go down the list. To me, that's sort of like a Saturday. It could end up being a Saturday Night Live moment that lives on in history forever. If you perform on the Grammys for that artist, you kind of will always remember. Or like when was it on the Grammys when Madonna kissed Britney Spears, or was that MTV? I can't remember. VMAs.
I think that was the VMAs.
But it's a similar thing, right? I also find the deluge of think pieces after the Grammys just chewing on this bone over and over and over about representation is just so fucking tiresome. I've never loved the idea of picking one person to say the best out of any. I think the Grammys are, I mean, I feel good for artists who get them, who can now say to their parents, like their parents can say, my kid won a Grammy, right? Because that means something it still means something, but I've always wondered, well, what exactly is this? It's just a music industry commercial for itself. And the whole Jay-Z talking about, Beyonce's won more Grammys, and that just seems so fucking cooked up to me, so contrived to just get us all chirping about whether, did this is there some injustice with representation, and oh, Taylor versus Beyonce kind of a thing. Like, it's just throwing the public a bone, and I'm not buying it. Now, why are people watching when you would think something like this would just be totally irrelevant? Maybe it's the live stuff. Maybe it's the fact that Taylor was there. I don't know. What do you think? Or if you had to conjecture,
I think there is something about. Okay, so broadly with TV, what we're seeing is that live does better than non-live. Like, if you want to get, if you look at the hosts of most, if you look at the hosts of most, Ricky Gervais should be the host of all award shows. If you look at the most popular shows on television, almost all of them are live events. And if you look at the popularity of concerts post-COVID, they have shot through the roof. They're on, even though prices have gone up dramatically too. One of the terms I've heard is funflation. That concerts have jumped through the roof. So there's something that I wonder if culturally we're at this point where we're almost rediscovering the beauty of concerts and concert-like things. That there's some evidence that points toward there. Also, it's not boring. It's actually reflective of the most popular genres of music. You will get pop stars. You will get Taylor Swift. You will get Luke Combs. You will get Killer Mike. You'll get the largest stars. The Oscars, for example, the biggest movies are rarely up for Oscars.
Yeah, that's an interesting dichotomy. Yeah, that's an interesting point. Never thought about that before.
Yeah, and even if it's not a really great reflection of what is the best in music, I think you would say that. I'd say that. I think a lot of people would agree with that. I'm assuming. Am I right in guessing your assertion?
Of course, yeah. Of course. Yes,
it is. It does represent the sort of the best of mass, not the best, but the most mass appeal music.
Right. And is this a symbol that people are craving belonging to a shared pop culture, which goes against
in a highly polarized time,
right? And in a highly media fragmented, go down your own rabbit hole, sort of balkanized landscape where you can just seek whatever you want. Do people just want to feel like they're part of something shared, even if it's pop dreck? And I also wonder how many people watch the Grammys because they're being spoon-fed a certain outlook. And I also wonder how many people hate watch them.
Spoon-fed. Go on.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, the music industry is not that far off from Hollywood in terms of what it wants to propagate, the messaging. Right? Wasn't it the Grammys last year with that devil? I forgot the name of the performers. Yeah, I'm almost positive. I wish I remember the name. I can look it up.
X?
No. There was another sort of devil in a cage performance. I'll look it up in a second while you're talking. But I wonder how many people who have an aversion to pop music watch them just to get annoyed And I wonder how many people who have an aversion to the politics coming out of these kinds of spaces, just watch to be pissed off, to be like, oh my God, look at what the world is coming to, promoting LGBT stuff and all that.
No doubt, hate watching is a real thing, and is a thing that certainly happens. I don't think that's, and it's a thing that it's Tucker and Bill O'Reilly before him, and Rachel Maddow, and so many hosts. Rush Limbaugh, to mention him in 2 straight episodes. Have all sort of benefited from this whole, like, I am pissed off, but I want to be pissed off. I kind of enjoy being pissed off at you while I listen and watch what you're doing.
Yeah, I'd almost call it love-hate watching.
Yeah, like there's some sensation that comes with it. So I think that there's a certain degree. I don't think that it's a 30% jump, but I think I'd argue that it's probably 1 in 4 seems a little high. Maybe 1 in 5 viewers of something like this are probably they're viewing it to make fun of it.
Yeah, or maybe just enjoying the kitsch of it.
Yeah.
Like the way you'd go to like Oscar parties. I never went to an Oscar party, or maybe once that I can think of. But there's a kitsch aspect, and that it can be fun in spite of, you could either be really into super popular music or not give a damn about it and still have a little bit of fun watching it. I do think there's something to people craving a shared language of pop culture, even if they're resisting it. I'm not super into that, but I think the craving is out there.
Well, yeah, I think I think that's part of why I think Netflix, as it's sort of reached a 200 million user mark, has sort of become a space where you get a lot of people sharing the same thing. If you look at their metrics, most of the people are watching the same stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's an overwhelming amount of their hits, like something like Wednesday, which I didn't watch at all, but like we're talking a good 50% of their viewership watched the show, which is an amazing concept. A concept that that's the Super Bowl. It's nuts. So I think there is a craving for a uniting thing now.
Shared experience,
Yeah.
definitely. I definitely think that's true.
And I think we could even drill deeper. I think there's some elements of it, I think, that goes back to just being isolated. For going through the whole COVID lockdown period, and then you want to share something with culture. And I think it's always there's always been a strain of that. I do think that with the sort of jump of music and music use, as we could also point to other metrics over the last few years, all up resoundingly, even though Spotify is still not profitable. It's not going to be profitable for a while. So, it's wanting. I do think there is a want to find a uniting factor, even if it's a hate watch.
Sure. I mean, I've thought this all along. People crave being temporally anchored, and the internet has given us freedom, has like untethered us from time.
Mhm.
And I've been saying this for actually over 10 years at this point. I've had this idea on my mind that they want a sense of where we are. I mean, so much internet content is like reacting in real time, which I never would have expected. I think you said you're not as surprised by that.
Yeah.
But I just thought, well, you can, why does that matter so much if you can do whatever? So yeah, maybe that's it. I mean, to me, the Grammys are just kind of silly. I just don't take them seriously. But if if that's an indicator that people want more shared stuff, I think overall that's a cool thing.
And I'm hoping that we get to the point with politics and other things in life where we end up sharing more things again.
Yes.
And
And benefiting from the best of both worlds, right? Allowing the internet to give us more of a variety. And it's almost like, I don't know if you've ever played Dungeons and Dragons, but like the 20-sided dice, where we're all somewhat anchored, but there are many different faces to that shared reality that you can spin it around and get to what is more to your liking, but there's a common ground.
I have not played Dungeons and Dragons, but I've been around when it was played.
Yeah, you're enough of a nerd.
I have friends that have played it.
Sure. Yeah.
And with that, let's get to another group of nerds.
Matt says, "Love the D&D reference."
Ready.
Thank you, Matt, for hanging with us and
Yeah.
for not showing us your dick or whoever's dick.
Oh, all right. All right. So Pitchfork's website will survive. This is according to residentadvisor.com. Remaining staff members who choose to remain anonymous also
Shouldn't
confirmed
be
that
too hard to narrow that down. So many of them got fired.
Yeah. Last month, parent company Condé Nast announced the merger, laying off 12 Pitchfork employees in the process. So congratulations, Sabi. Your reviews and news will stay on the internet.
That's if they don't take them down for some of the shit I'm saying. But so far, so good.
I think you're gonna be all right. I honestly, I do it. And this is another quote. I wanted to get your take on this one, exact, because I love this. It doesn't feel like anyone's in charge, one current staff member said. When asked if it seemed like GQ knew what was going on, they replied, "No." They continued, "It's just collective confusion because we have a lot of questions and it doesn't seem to be a lot of answers."
Yeah, I saw another piece that described the response from the GQ staff. Like, so the staff that Pitchfork is now in their hands.
Mm-hmm.
The word that this writer used, and I wish I remembered the link, was embarrassed. That they were like, well, we don't really know what we're doing, what we're supposed to do with this kind of either. You know, this decision came down, and now we're kind of like, there was some, I think, this is me adding flavor here, but it sounded like they were like empathetic to what the Pitchfork team were going through and didn't really want to be like, hey, we're going to barge in and like we don't even know where we're supposed to go with this. So it seems like there's going to be some growing pains, but maybe there's like a respect there from the GQ people. I mean, I can't imagine this won't be somewhat painful, right? I mean, this is going to be messy. Maybe you've been in situations like this before that you can enlighten us.
Not exactly this. No. I've been the closest, like I've had two newsrooms sort of becoming merged into one, which is a little bit different than this. But it's similar.
But I mean, there is miscommunication and sort of slightly cross purposes sometimes. Mixed messages towards you from each side, right?
Without a doubt. And thanks, Matt. Hopefully it was his actual head and not his penis. But yeah, absolutely. There were definitely, it's a hard process when you are, especially when it's clear which element of the organization is the alpha, because there is always an alpha, and there's already there's someone who's going to lose.
Well, it's clear in this case, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, without a doubt.
The message is clear. Like, I don't know how many, like 12 of y'all were expendable. Your asses are expendable too if you don't.
Totally, and that's how you feel. When you're in a circumstance like that where all of a sudden there's all these other people from this other publication, you feel vulnerable. You feel like, hey, there's nothing I can do to guarantee that I'm gonna be okay. And really wary of it. So from the GQ side, they're saying that they respect the Pitchfork staffers coming in.
That's the impression I got. The link I read, the journalist used the word embarrassed, that they felt that this had sort of been foisted on them too. And they didn't want to like step on toes too much, and they're not even sure. It's like, well, we're not a music site, so it's sort of like if I'm trying to think if the fire department were all of a sudden put under the the umbrella of the police department, and the chief of police was, well, I respect the fire marshal. I'll try to work with them. You know what I mean? Like they wouldn't jump in to be like, yeah, this is our shit now.
Let's rearrange everything because
Right.
we know better. Because they don't know anything about firefighting.
Right. And it's there. I'm sure, I would think, this wasn't spelled out in the article I read, but I would think there's a sense of professional courtesy and also an immediate awareness. Fuck, this could have been the other way around. If somebody upstairs just on a whim decides we're the ones who are out of here and we're getting folded under somebody else, they'll do it to us too.
And
Right?
if you look around, you look at what just happened with the Messenger. You look around. I don't know if you're familiar with the Messenger.
I'm not.
Basically, it was a daily. Basically, they were trying to create another national news website.
Oh yes. I heard about this, and it hasn't worked. And it was supposed to be a centrist.
Yes, a
quote,
centrist site. Yeah. They burned through somewhere between $50 and $100 million in under a year, and then they folded
Man, where do I
with
sign?
no notice. And they stripped all of their all of the posts off the internet. Funny enough, there's a LinkedIn account still being run by a former employee that is just like giving props to random layoff coworkers. If you look around at the LA Times, they're going through heavy layoffs right now. If you look around at that journalism institution after institution that are not middle or lower tier, we're talking your top level and above people, they're all going through massive shakeups. And if you're at GQ, you have to be wondering, hey, when is our turn coming?
Yeah. When are we next? We could be next, or we probably are.
Totally. Yeah, we survived this one. We came up on top on this one, but odds are next time.
Yeah, what if they cut half of our staff and put Pitchfork /GQ under some other umbrella? Yeah, I definitely got to start saving PDFs of my shit everywhere. But
Sure.
But bringing this full circle, though, you and I have been talking about this for years now, about how newsrooms mishandled the transition to the rise of online culture.
Mm-hmm.
Could what you're talking about, could the non-exclusivity format help revive old media in some way?
That's a difficult question. I think that yes, here's the problem. And there was one other thing I wanted to get to, and I think this may seem like a long way to go, but it answers your question. All right? Because I didn't realize I made this slide, but I did make a slide. Okay. ESPN, Fox, and Warner Brothers Discovery, they partner for a streaming service, right? All right. Yeah.
You described as cats and dogs getting along.
Yes. Yeah. These are all competitors, right? These media companies killed the cable bundle to recreate the cable bundle. All right. It's expected to come out later this year. A lot of people think it'll be between $30 and $50. There's going to be legal issues for sure. All right, because and NBC and CBS and the cable companies are all going to have problems with this.
With each other? Oh, with this.
With this. All right. But this is how it ties to your question. If you look at the top guys at Fox, Rupert Murdoch, and yes, his son Lachlan, but Rupert Murdoch. If you look at David Zaslav, who's at Warner Brothers Discovery, you look at Bob Iger, who is at ESPN Disney. These guys are all basing every move on the past. They're making their decisions about how to shape their organizations about the way things were, not about the way things are and the way they're going to be in the future. Why? Because all these guys are deep vets. Bob Iger's 70. David Zaslav's in his 60s. Rupert Murdoch's in his 80s.
Mm-hmm.
They look at the old cable bundle and are like, hey, why don't we just recreate the cable bundle and get things back to the good old days? Thing is, the good old days ain't coming back.
Mm.
What you need and what you were getting at in terms of sharing content across platforms in order to help old media, that's newfangled thinking.
Really recent.
Really
it's like
recent.
last week thinking. It's like the Joe Rogan announcement.
Without a doubt.
And McAfee and Shannon and
without. That's how this all ties together, right?
Right.
Totally. You're absolutely right. The problem is the people who run these companies, they're not even worried about the future. They're worried about next quarter.
Hmm.
And I think,
just to add super quick, sorry to interrupt, but just to finish that thought, and they probably have a hard time imagining a future that's different than the past that they've known.
Yeah, without a doubt. And that's my point. That's my absolute, total, complete point. All right. The idea like you posed or Matt poses here, that they all need to be on a shared platform with everything paid based on views in a perfect world. It shouldn't be a perfect world. It should be a thing that we should experiment with. We should be trying this. But instead, they see the world as it was and are trying to recreate it in order to keep Wall Street happy. And until they are forced to rethink or new people are put in who will think about the world in a whole new way, to think about these organizations and how media gets from one person to another, and how not even me and you, I'm going to be 40 this year. You're 50, right?
51.
All right. So it's more about your kid. It's more about my nieces and nephews, how they see, how do they want to consume media? That's how you should be designing the media of now. It's not, hey, let's recreate something in the past because it made a lot of money in the past. And if we can just bring it back, it'll make more money. No. We need to be forward thinking. And these media bosses are no longer forward thinking.
So what happens with this merger? Or it's not a merger, technically a merger, but it's sort of it's a partnership.
That's the fascinating thing, because it's not really it's on the screen there. The legal issues are the question. If you're Brian Roberts, who runs Comcast, who owns NBC, Comcast is a cable company. Comcast is a bundle company. If you're and you're like, hey, they didn't include me in this deal. Like, why would I let these people gang up against me?
But
When
what
you call
legal grounds?
What do you call your monopoly?
Oh, okay.
Basically, you could argue that these are antitrust.
Mm.
You can make some calls down to Washington. I'm sure Comcast has a lot of friends in Washington.
Wow. So you're talking like really fucking put some dynamite on the tracks to blow this thing up.
That's one possibility. I could see a world where maybe they are cut into this.
I was just going to say, wouldn't you ask to be part of it instead?
But the speculation is that they were purposely left out because they're a cable company. And the idea here is to own the cable bundle, the new cable bundle.
But you're saying that those distinctions are less important as we go forward. People aren't going to give a fuck as much.
Yeah.
Right? Like, yeah. Interesting stuff.
We're already there. We're already there where people aren't giving a fuck as much.
Right. Because you don't need a cable bundle to do Peacock.
Yeah, you don't.
So
and plus add the fact that Disney, Bob Iger, and Brian Roberts, who in the Roberts family, who own Comcast, they don't exactly get along. They, like Bob Iger has done massive deals with Fox. He's done deals with David Zaslav and the people at Warner Brothers Discovery. They don't get along with the Comcast people. Like they have been fighting for years. That's a long story. I won't go there. The CBS situation is different and interesting because CBS has a massive payment coming up in a couple of weeks. They may go bankrupt. They may be sold. They may even end up bought by Warner Brothers Discovery or Fox or ESPN. They may be bought by some vulture capitalist company who just strips them bare and sells off pieces. Like they're on the edge of something big happening. What actually happens, no one really knows right now. So my guess is that's why they weren't included. But if I'm Comcast and I'm CBS, I'm the Redstones and I'm Sherry Redstone and I'm Brian Roberts. Go have a cocktail.
Yeah, right. Sure, of course. I'm sure that's
have a conversation.
You have to think that's already sort of motion, like things are heading that way.
And if you're let's say YouTube, who's in this battle, if you're Amazon, who's in this battle, or you're Apple, maybe you have a cocktail with those two. And you end up with two behemoths competing, which actually gets to Matt's comment here about monthly subscriptions and different platforms to watch soccer. I mean, this is what essentially is being proposed right now with this. I mean, they want a subscription for you to watch the NFL and a subscription for you to watch the NFL. I'm already paying one.
Right. No,
directly. Like I don't want to add two more. I really
no,
don't.
or even any like right.
So what we need is forward-thinking leadership. And it's the kind of thing that I don't think is going to happen with this era of media ownership.
Don't you think it'll organically happen when somebody else on a smaller scale who has a vision ends up innovating or maybe even stumbling their way into something that works, and then the bigger players will catch on?
Essentially, that's what happened with Netflix.
Right, because I mean, we're not there yet, totally.
Yeah.
But these institutions are starting to show signs that they know that they have to adapt. You're just saying that from the top, a decision like this partnership shows that they're not adapting the right way.
Yeah, the top dogs at these existing companies are not going to make decisions that are forward looking.
Hmm.
That's not how they're going to approach things. There's too much to lose.
Well, but
Um,
there's a lot to lose if they don't.
but most of them will be retired by the time those
Mm.
decisions actually affect. They're worried about the bottom line now.
Hmm.
What I do think though, there is room for a disruptor. I think Amazon is more poised to do that because they're already selling games. They have a long established channels function where you could just like add a chunk. You're also seeing leagues like I said, the NFL is selling it. You saw MLS partner with Apple to sell all their games at once.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have individual teams
Mm-hmm.
also doing this. You have MSG and Yes Network. Once again, cats and dogs working together. They're compiling their stuff to create a mega New York City based streaming service because they can't do it alone. They can't walk it alone.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what you're going to see is a bunch of wreckage. And I think the thing that makes this a little bit different than the Netflix innovating with TV and movies is that with TV and movies, you can just create your own. And there's a lot more sources of these things. To get NFL rights, you have one chance in a decade, maybe two. So it's harder to get your hands on that kind of live sports rights. They are not only expensive and they're expensive and they're rarely on the market.
Hmm. And there's one of the only things that's like dependable for decent
Monoculture.
numbers. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Everything you've been talking about.
Yeah. Getting back to the Grammys being up, getting back to the Super Bowl, which is tomorrow, which will probably get 100 plus. Last few have been around 100
In the States alone, you're saying?
in the states alone.
Yeah.
Around the world, we're probably looking closer to half a billion, something like that.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
But it's not as big as the World Cup, but like World Cup final. But like it's going to be gigantic because it is one of those monoculture things, and you have to invest heavily in order to get one of those monoculture things. So I don't think we're going to see that with an upstart, at least not now.
Hmm. So there has to be a changing of the guard. You're saying these people have to age out in order for forward thinking to become part of the culture at these companies.
Yes. Oh, Chiefs versus 49ers. I have to pick the Niners. What you got, Sabi?
In terms of who I'm rooting for or who I think is going to win.
Both.
I'm rooting for the 49ers, but I'm not going to make such a heavy investment in it that I'm going to be disappointed. And it's hard to imagine the Chiefs losing. I hope they do. It would be a great story. It'd be awesome, actually, just for the sport, I think. But, for me, the game will mostly be background. I really, really, really look forward to the Super Bowl every year. This is the first one I'm just like I'm not super into it. I'll watch. And I just, like you were saying, you thought the Chiefs, you felt there's a sense of inevitability.
Mhm.
They're going to win it all. They just seem so unstoppable. It would take
Yeah.
like some kind of miracle. And I mean, it could happen. That's why we'll watch, right? The storyline. But
Yeah, maybe it is Brock Purdy's year. Have you seen the meme going on around him?
no.
That he is Lee Harvey Oswald.
That's funny. Actually, he kind of looks like him. Yeah.
Not kinda. He really looks like him. Really does. Like a lot. Give me one moment. I'll pop up.
Well, that reminds me. I just happened to stumble across a Bill Hicks clip where he talks about going to Dallas to the museum where like they have the museum, the book repository or whatever.
Mhm.
And he said, yeah, it's a lot like what really happened because Lee Harvey Oswald wasn't in there. Wow. Holy shit.
Yeah. It is.
That's
True.
eerie.
Yeah. Yeah. For those of you listening, we're looking at a photo of Brock Purdy and a photo of Lee Harvey Oswald next to each other.
Wow.
And it is eerie how much these two look like each other. And shout out to Rochester's own E-Bombs World, still going. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I hope something great happens tomorrow. I hope it's it's not really a Dave versus Goliath story,
No,
but
no,
it is
not
it
at
is
all.
Brock, being it's this guy that nobody believes in and is constantly called a game manager, put him in cuffs. That's pretty funny. So listen, the moral of all this, with everything you're talking about with these big moves in media, is I need to find myself a high by my standards, like a salaried media position, which will get downsized in a few months, and then I can collect unemployment that's worth more than I'm making now anyway, and sit pretty and keep doing my thing.
Sounds about right. Yeah, totally with you.
Should I read I don't think I should read live the email I got from a publicist at a major label that will remain nameless. I'm saying this because I think this will interest you. That said, they just got a note from management. This is on a Saturday. I just got this email, by the way, right? So you never hear from these people over the weekend. We just got a message from management about an interview that I posted the audio of on YouTube and Spotify. They didn't authorize that to be posted, so they're asking you to take it down. And what I want to say is no, but legally, if they didn't clear it for posting, could they send me? I mean, they could get their lawyers, or they could just complain to YouTube and have it pinged.
No. I don't think that I don't think they could complain it to YouTube if it's an interview that you have recorded. Do they know that it was recorded?
Yes. Oh, definitely. Yes, absolutely.
I don't think they have much of a case.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll look into it
because it's not you using copyrighted material. It's not you using so it's not a question of fair use. It's a question of permissions, but they knew you were being recorded. So like I think it would be a very, very difficult case for them to make.
And so we didn't even do video.
Yeah. It's just audio.
And this was for a written piece that one of the music outlets ran. But their thing is, well, they didn't authorize the audio to be posted. It's like, okay, this always bugs the shit out of me. The interview was great. It was wholesome. It wasn't controversial, but it's like, you have your artists go into these stupid morning zoo kind of interviews. And there's tons of interviews floating around the internet anyway. And you're going to fucking ask me to take this down. That really pisses me off. Like, I feel like I don't want to say it here while we're live streaming, just in case there's some sort of, because a record label has more legal muscle. They could make.
Yeah, they could be annoying,
Right.
but it's less about that. I think, and I think that's probably the more likely scenario that could happen is if they really wanted to, they could be an ass. And, they could if they really wanted to, they could be an ass, and they could be it's like most lawsuits are not meant to be actually actually lead to actual litigation.
No,
They're
but
meant
it means I have to engage a lawyer. What's that?
as threats.
Right. Right. And it means I have to engage a lawyer. That's what they're they're
Yeah.
thinking that I will shrink back from that because I don't want to have to go through the expense.
Yeah, precisely.
But I just think like, listen, yeah, I'm pissed. And could I now spin this? I could talk about it publicly.
Yeah,
Be like,
yeah, and perhaps you should do a piece on it, just expounding on it.
mhm, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And see, I don't want to mess up my relationship with that label either because it puts the label in a tough spot because
Well,
management is
that's the larger question for you is whether if you just want to keep that relationship nice, then perhaps you should just do them the courtesy.
yeah, but I don't look at it as doing them the courtesy. Management is asking them that, and it's like this is an advertisement for your fucking band. It
Yeah.
might be because they've caught wind of things I've said on the
Maybe,
channel,
maybe,
but I
or
mean,
I think it's unlikely.
yeah, it's more that they just want to. It's actually what you're describing. I think it's an old way of thinking.
Yeah.
And it's like these dudes are doing fucking Zoom interviews with all these YouTube channels, all and actually they even let them play the music.
Yeah,
A few seconds of the music, like
yeah. I think they have no argument.
so. It's like, and then you're gonna ask me to take this down,
Yeah.
as if somehow this makes you the artist look bad, man. Fuck that shit.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
Yeah. So yeah, Matt hates the control. We hate the control too. It's actually been really cool to have somebody following along.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
appreciate
yeah. And props to you, Matt, for sticking with us for this long.
and offering like substantial comments instead of
Yeah,
the person we
Totally.
spoke with before. I'm not afraid. I mean, like sounded like a fucking incel, like brain damaged individual.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, I didn't even know the
Well-
question you asked.
Well, someone else clicked that link I put out there, and I looked at him, and I booted him because he was wearing a white face in a hood, and he looked like he was in his mom's basement.
A white face, or one of those like Guy Fawkes type things.
No, like it was plain white. It was like a cutout piece of paper with eyes and mouth.
Why are we attracting the like random?
No idea.
Like, well, how do they find this? I mean, they must just be looking for streaming.
Yeah, yeah.
Live
Well,
streams to crash.
Well, if you go through YouTube and you're looking at live streams, you could go just under the live tab and you can just see live stream after live stream after live stream.
It's pathetic that people feel they have to do that to have any kind of engagement.
Yeah.
The guy that the guy that you led into the chat, that person's definitely not getting laid, no matter what, no matter like, so good luck with your life of incelhood.
Yeah.
Props to you as well, Matt. Thank you for the thoughtful responses and following along.
So before I let you go, Sabi, like you want to add anything you're reading, watching, or listening to?
Yes. So I upped my paying Substack. Like I became a paying Substack subscriber to these channels. I wrote them down. Blocked and Reported with Katie Herzog and Jesse Singal.
Great show.
A Special Place in Hell with Megan Daum and Sarah Hayter.
Haven't heard that one yet.
I love it.
Megan Daum is an interesting person, but I haven't heard that one yet.
Definitely. And so is
Love
Sarah
that.
Hayter.
Don't know Sarah Hayter at all.
Yeah, there's a lot to her story, a ton to get into, but and what I love about those shows, I'm a big fan of rapport between
Mhm.
co-hosts. That's a big thing that I look for in like sports talk, and those two in particular, Blocked and Reported, and A Special Place in Hell, man, they're like, it's not just entertainment or a way to just sort of feed my mind. It's very like nutritious. Like I feel nourished when I'm listening to episodes on either of those. I've gotten into a thing where I'm walking my daughter to school several days a week now, and I walk over to her neighborhood, which takes about 40 minutes, and I love listening to these shows. Like it feels like a really excellent use of my time. Like I said, it feels very substantial, very nourishing, nutritious for the mind. So
And just to add, I just subscribed to Democracy Unplugged.
okay.
I don't know if you're familiar with
I'm
it.
not. I was going to ask you, can you tell us more about it?
Demography Unplugged, not Democracy. Demography Unplugged. It's by Neil Howe, the author of the Fourth Turning.
Yes, you've been talking to me about him for years now.
Yeah, he's got an awesome Substack that is just, it's for a geeky guy who's interested in like how America and the world and generations are changing. It's really, really cool. They were talking about things like how there was one piece that I loved about and I wrote about it for my commentary podcast, James Brown Commentary, if you want to find it. You can also find me at jamesbrowntv.substack.com, or media studies .substack.com. You could it was all about how millennials in particular are turning on Biden, not because they love Trump, but because there's a lack of a great other option.
Mhm.
Like, so what we may see, like we're seeing this bifurcation of male millennial politics and female millennial politics, that women were way more likely to be activists, especially when they were younger. And I have plenty of experience with that. I've seen it. I mean, I've dated a few. and millennial men were where we are more conservative. Millennial women are more progressive, to be generous, and it's and how the pressures that's putting on family formation, because it's becoming harder. It's becoming harder for shout out to Matt.
That's great. Yeah, man. In the UK too, which means it's like
Yeah.
like 7:00 on a Saturday night, and Matt's hanging with us.
Nice. And yeah, so it's the fact that when couples when families form, you are looking for people who you share values with, you share things with. You are more likely to even if you move away from your hometown, you are more likely to marry someone from your hometown. If you're more likely to marry someone who you went to school with, someone who you share something tangible, something hearty with on some level. And in politics and values were one of those things. And now it's one of these things where you have these camp, and you're going to end up with a lot of marriages, a lot of relationships not forming because of these things. It's a fascinating article, and there's a ton of fascinating stuff on there. So demographyunplugged.substack.com.
Yeah, that reminds me. Sorry about the bump. That reminds
No
me. I stumbled on the Red Scare podcast.
Oh, that's a great one.
Reddit. So I'm getting into that now too. It really is great. And there's a Reddit, Red Scare Pod, I don't. It's not like they're official. I don't think it's started by them. I don't know, but it's people discussing it. And I started following this thread and then commented a shit ton on it. Why do all the woke women of color have white boyfriends? I know it's something that's joked about quite a bit, but I noticed it again recently. I wonder if all the obsession about, quote, white supremacy and, quote, white privilege kind of creates a fetish to these people, which is what I've been saying for a long time. It's uncanny and it's odd. Not that I'm complaining. Beggars can't be choosers, I suppose. So I told you this was one of the most entertaining threads I've seen
Yeah.
in forever. And then I started commenting on it, and somebody on here pointed out, though, that they do see couples that are diametrically opposed in
Mhm.
political values.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the dynamic that's driving. Like I completely agree that
Mhm.
generally people want to have a sense of shared values, but now
It's becoming harder.
there's a
Hard to
friction
find.
there, right?
Hmm.
And I think that that's sort of what's playing itself out in these outward expressions of all this hostility and lack of acceptance, intolerance. I've been arguing for years. So much of what we're seeing with people just being so hyper dogmatic is because they know they can't change Granny's mind at the Thanksgiving table, and it's frustrating to them. And so they're going to come after you harder online because their friends and family, they know they don't have control over that. And so now, if what this commenter on this thread is saying is true, or if that's more of a bigger trend, then now this is in couples. This is like in nuclear families, not just extended family. So I mean, this reminds me of what was the Michael Moore movie? Not Bowling for Columbine, the one after that they started. There was a lot of controversy. Fuck, what was that movie?
Fahrenheit 9/11.
Maybe, yes. And I remember someone wrote into the DNC here locally, and she was like, "Yeah, my husband went to watch it, and I watched it with him, but I had to tell him this is fiction." It's what we're talking about, where you could tell this married couple were not on the same page. I just have to tell my husband this is fiction. I wonder, because you've observed before.
Mhm.
And I remember saying to you, I said, in every couple, life partnership, marriage, whatever, people that choose to stay together for the long haul, or at least try to. I remember putting it by you as like, well, isn't there at least one stumbling block that cannot be easily resolved? And then you said, I think there's usually more than one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm curious, like where do you fall on that?
On stumbling blocks.
Yeah, and just seeing people go for the long haul together as couples.
I think it's difficult. And I think the way that we've structured our society has gotten difficult. I think and I say this as myself as a guy who's dating but not married, that like the fact that we are waiting longer, that we're becoming more entrenched in our ways and our perspectives prior to making the commitment, that it becomes harder to find someone who's where you are and grow with it.
Totally. And we're in like this like ambient sense that you can't coexist. That's so pervasive. It's in the air now. So many people have drunk this Kool-Aid that you have to resist any kind of coexistence with views that you think are an existential threat to your own. You're going to run into that in a partnership at some point. Might not be
Sure.
over politics, but it'll be some value that is like, wow, we're really in different places here, and seemingly can't bridge the gap. So hopefully people are, man, I wish I could read the comic because it was really entertaining. And I finally had to realize I'm the male version of that. I'm not woke, but I've pretty much only dated white women, not because I haven't wanted to, but it's just a matter of availability, right? It's just a matter of the people that I've encountered who are more likely to be on my page enough to date me have happened to be, it's not an accident, but that just has happened to be the case. So I was like saying all this shit, kind of making fun of these woke women of color. And then I was like, wait, holy shit, that's kind of like me that I'm talking about here too.
I have a rainbow coalition.
I used that term in a comment and said, yes, well, I would ideally support the idea of a rainbow coalition of women who want to jump on my dick. I have to, and I broke it down, like I put serious thought into explaining some of the factors. But man, it's a fascinating thing because you and I have seen this so much.
Yeah. It is a very real thing.
Totally. And like in media people too, like I don't know if Malika Andrews is one of them, but a lot of these, what Whitlock pejoratively refers to as African Americans who have white partners, get on the air and they're super clenched fists.
They're overcompensating.
Totally.
And to get to Matt's question again, is conservative Republican in the United States?
Yes and no,
but not 100% yes. I think we came to a similar answer.
Yeah, Republicans are all conservatives, but not all conservatives are Republicans. Could you say that?
That sounds about right. Yeah.
There's definitely huge overlap, and they're often used interchangeably, but that's not quite as precise as it needs to be.
Yeah. So, on that note, Sabi,
to the Rainbow Coalition.
Rainbow coalitions. and later, everybody.
Yeah, thanks again, Matt. That was fun with Matt on board.
Oh, by the way, give a big plug. Feedbackdef.substack.com.
Feedbackdef.substack.com, and then feedbackdef on YouTube, where you can come across this interview that I'm being asked to take down. And I'm not going to get into legal trouble for saying this here, am I? For saying that I'm not inclined to take it down yet until such time as I'm legally advised to do so.
No. Yeah. Okay. I'm not an atheist either, Matt. I was.
Oh, you can't end the show now. You got to talk about this.
Agnostic camp.
Do you mind indulging me and the audience talking a little bit about this?
Yeah. You take the wheel.
Okay, so you've told me a little bit about it, but my sense when you first told me was that this was a fairly recent development.
Yes.
Can we start there? What is it that precipitated this shift? Because I remember you saying to me that when your older sister passed away when you were a kid, and I should give the audience some background. You come from a religious family. Your mom is still religious. And you tried to reach to some sense of solace from what your mom and your family was describing as the place where one should go seek that, right? Basically religion or spirituality. And you said, I just couldn't bring myself to be convinced. And then you said that, let's just say it was a difficult conversation where you tried telling your mother, and I think it was shortly after this, like when this was still fresh, right? When your sister's passing was still, and you were like, no, I don't. You like bluntly were just like, I'm not in for that.
Thereabouts.
And then your mom had a real reaction. And that caused a big rift. And then you said she never quite apologized. It was more like a non-apology apology. It took a long time. So that's the entire time I've known you. I've thought you were more of like a rationalist materialist, and it sounds like this has recently shifted. Why? Tell us. Or what can you tell us?
In the last 5 years or so, I've embraced that I don't know in so many things in my life. So many things that I was so solid on, so strongly believing about. I came to realize that, hey, to question myself, to question why. Why am I so set in my ways about things like whether it's politics or religion? Why am I being told certain things and it doesn't feel right? And I'm just believing it outright. So I started doing, as I tend to do, I do usually, whether it's quarterly or at least twice a year, pretty deep self-reflection where I think about things I've done, things where my life is going, who I am, what am I? I do this a lot, probably too much. And I came to this thought that, like, I don't know for sure. And I think probably the moment was pretty early on in the COVID stuff. It is not just because of COVID. Some of it was definitely being alone in my thoughts. I think in my old apartment over on Akron Street, and just just being in a world where everyone was told to be afraid of each other, and I had the phrase "be not afraid" come into my head. Obviously, that's a biblical phrase. And it's like, obviously, when you grow up, as deeply religious, and I could go on for a while about this part, but if you grow up as deeply religious as I did, you realize that that's the kind of thing that does not leave you. When you're raised in a certain orthodoxy, it stays with you. The values certainly stay with you. And as I sort of just accepted that, I just sort of I came to rethink a lot about how I live my life and what I do. Now I haven't got to the point where I'm like, praying and thinking that God's a whatever. But I do wonder whether I think it's hard to say that this stuff was not made with intention, that this was a cosmic accident. And I found it harder as I get a little bit older, the more thought to it. There's this old book called Some by David Eagleman, where it's 40 tales of the afterlife. So basically like 40 possibilities of what, short stories on what it could be like. And there's one of them that I think about often, and it's that God created the heavens and the earth, and then he went on vacation and didn't tell anybody. And that feels right. That is this sort of absent, not a figure that that is interacting with us in our lives, that are shaping our lives, that's giving us meaning, all that stuff. But that there was some sort of thing that created this, and it's kind of absent.
Like a deadbeat parent, basically.
Yeah, kind of. That seems more plausible. I'm not saying it's true, which is not why I'm a theist, or anything like that.
Which is why you're not a theist, because you
Yes,
because
why I'm not.
you can't say this, you feel this is true.
Yeah, but I can
Yeah.
say that there's enough doubt
Mhm.
where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna open myself to it. So Matt has a follow-up for me.
I know it sounds like, and I'm just teasing you, Matt, here, but it sounds like Matt has been switched from beer to weed,
You want to read the question,
and
Sabi?
it started to kick in. Matt, and just to answer his previous question, he said, I'm an atheist. I feel like I'd be a conservative. In the States, there is a tension. Maybe James, you can speak to this better, between theistic, religion-based conservatism, and economic-minded fiscal conservatism.
Yeah, typically.
Or and certainly some overlap, but those are a Venn diagram, I guess, is what I would say.
Also, there's a tension between religious-based communities. There are liberal churches and liberal sects, and there are more conservative churches and conservative sects, and they do overlap, and it's kind of a messy group. But like, there's another, it's definitely a tension there, as well.
For sure. So Matt says, as the THC kicks in, do you feel if you was born 500 years in the future and somehow they could stop the cell's aging process and we lived indefinitely, would you feel the same? I mean, I guess that it's sort of a moot point, I think. But we're also so not there. Like these ideas of transcending death. And what I would propose to you, Matt, is that transhumanism is not
We could do 10 hours on that one.
well, and I won't say too much about it. And I know that's not what you're suggesting, Matt, but to me, transhumanism ultimately comes back to a faith that somehow your consciousness can keep going, and it defies all practicality, because it's like, well, where
Totally
are those
agree.
servers going to live, and who's going to maintain them into perpetuity? And even how do you even get your consciousness into a server to begin with? We're not even close to that. So it's an interesting question for sure, Matt, and I'm not sure how that changes things. I feel like go ahead.
Well, I do think it does a little bit. I think part of what I'm feeling is mortality.
Yeah, pressure from the fact
That I'm way grayer than I was a few years ago, and feeling like, I've always sort of believed that you die alone.
Hmm.
It's one of those things that just seemed abundantly true. That in the moment, even if you're surrounded by people, you die alone. Like you have moments where you're sort of clinging to life, and you just let it just goes away in a blink.
cats and dogs prefer that.
Yeah.
They go off to be by themselves, which always struck me.
Very interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would they want that?
I know, when you would think they would lean on you more.
Yeah.
I don't know if
Like,
dogs do it as much. Maybe Matt can answer that for us, or at least UK dogs, pussies. But not. But I mean, cats definitely go off to be by themselves, and that does strike me as really strange, because you want to be there for them.
Well, especially with dogs, like, I live with a dog and a cat, and a cat for the first time since we lived together long, long ago. and a dog for the first time ever, and they get off on being near you. They follow you around. Like Eddie, our dog, he sleeps on my feet. Like he'll just like, if I'm sitting down, he'll put his head or his foot on his paw on my shoe. He wants to know if I'm even going to move. Like dude is like, well, just like, they want to be with you, except in that last moment. Is a really interesting idea. Maybe, because I can't stand to to see the agony that comes, from watching,
I don't know.
knowing you're gone.
I don't know. And I don't know if dogs do that as much. I think sometimes they do. They just sort of crawl off somewhere to dog lovers could correct us on that. Yeah, I mean, there is also, because they don't want their carcass to bring predators, supposedly. Oh, wow.
That's wild.
That is really interesting. So it would endanger their community, their little pod, their little group.
Yeah, that's very wild.
Shit. Yeah, wow.
I would not even have thought about that.
Matt's like switched from weed to shrooms now. Now he's like fucking talking like genius level shit. Who knew we had Terrence McKenna on the other side of our comment thread?
Yeah.
I mean, so you feel people die alone, even if they're surrounded. Why would you feel alone, even surrounded? I guess because you have to go through with it by yourself.
Yes.
Nobody's holding your hand.
Yes. Even if they
through
are
the
holding
door.
your hand.
Right. Then they can't do it to where you're going. Yeah.
Yeah. As your senses fade, it's just you.
Hmm. Well, I mean, I've always been told the idea that your loved ones who have passed on
Mhm.
show up to guide you across, and this gets into all sorts of metaphysics, because it's like, well, does the soul of a person that you knew carry on? And if so, is it even that person anymore? Is it something more sort of, it's not the person you knew? And I don't know. I mean, you can hear about these near-death experiences, but is that the brain just kind of glitching?
Mm-hmm.
I tend not to subscribe to this idea that it's just the brain giving itself an illusion, but I mean, we don't know.
Well, I think to that point, that's another thing that got me to this place. Is essentially our brains, energy pulsing through our brains and our bodies. And there's a more, I believe it's Buddhist principle, the idea of like we are all simply energy and we're in an ocean of energy. And if we know what we know about science or believe about science today, is that energy was and is
And cannot be destroyed, according
Yeah.
to the current, like, sort of truisms of science, founding principles that we subscribe to.
Sure. And with that, you are simply a part of this larger thing that is forever. What could that thing be? That's where it's like, that's part of how my brain got to like the idea of doubt.
Interesting. And also, you're not only part of this thing, you're sort of, so we are each an arrangement of living matter and cells. And also this thing that science has as of yet not been able to quantify, which is consciousness. It has no answer for that.
Mm-hmm.
But you're also host to billions of living things that are making you you are made up of them. They are making you up. They're like little bricks, but they're also independent of you too. They're not you,
Mhm.
which is a trip. So we must then be that same thing for something larger.
Mhm.
We're little teensy weensy minuscule cells. And when we die, we, like you're saying, go into the larger pool and convert into some different energy. We feed some maggots, like feed the soil, feed a tree. That's the purely like matter, material, physical perspective.
It also, I don't know why this reminds me, but it's another one of the short stories from some that by the David Eagleman's book on it, where he talked about in one scenario where you're in a giant cafeteria, everybody has died, and you're with everybody who's ever been, and they're in this cafeteria and or waiting room, and they're waiting for their name to be called, and it's the last time that their name was called ever on Earth, and and they get up and they walk in the back after their name is called, and then things just go back to the way it is.
So wait, according to this model, when you die, do you get to stay in the cafeteria or do you
You
just
stay in the cafeteria until someone forgets your name.
Oh wow. So like the movie Coco,
I haven't
the
seen
Disney
Coco.
movie. It is one of
I
my
haven't.
favorites.
Uh,
When my daughter
yeah,
was 2, we started watching it and I love it. And there's one scene that always makes me cry every time. But yeah, it's based on the Mexican cosmology of life and death and the afterlife, and that once people put your living relatives who have survived you put your picture up on what's called an ofrenda, which is like a little altar, homemade. But once no one alive remembers you, you fade away from the afterlife too.
yeah. Sounds like the exact same premise.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome movie, by the way. I mean, we can criticize Disney for a lot of stuff, but man, they do make some excellent stuff too.
I'll watch Coco. I'll do a book report.
Come to media studies where you're all students doing book reports. And
Yeah,
Matt has gotten an A in today's class.
yeah,
Uh,
man.
I'm the TA, the teaching assistant, and man, Matt gets the gold star for the day. But
Yeah,
yeah, interesting stuff. It sounds like not knowing is more comfortable for you now.
yes. Like it's my biggest gripe with most of the planet today. It's the certainty about the uncertain.
Right, which Matt, I want to watch Coco. Do yourself a favor and watch it. If you have a kid in your family, I don't know if you're a parent or what, or someone, a relative, it's an awesome movie. Super, super well done. This is the thing. I interviewed Michelle Ndegeocello recently, but I also interviewed her in 2008 or 2009. And she said back in 2008, she was like, that's the thing. Nobody knows. We don't know. And I repeated that to her, and she was like, yeah, I'm going to say that. She said the last time she said, and I'm going to say this with my dick in your face. She said, nobody knows. And that's the thing, like religion and science have become mirror images in terms of their dogmatic certainty. Like the scientific method is not supposed to give us the sense of certainty that we are fed in its name all the time. And that's what's always driven me crazy. You can sort of rationalize it and be like, well, you can only do things you can prove and things you can empirically show, but it defaults to leaving people in a state, well, what we can't prove is not real. And that's a mistake. That's a leap of faith, if you ask me. Matt, my biggest annoyance is not being born at an advanced time in humanity, so I will never know the stuff humans will discover at a time we move scientifically so fast. Well, I mean, you're getting to see a lot more in one lifetime than anybody has prior, so I would count yourself lucky.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Or read Ray Bradbury and stuff like that, Isaac Asimov and people like that. Just dip into science fiction, or William Gibson. You know, get your fix that way. Give me 1,000 years and I'd be happy. Well, I mean, I hate to break it to you, but you might want to make do with what you got.
Well, on that note, we'll be back. Well, at least I'll be back. I'm not sure Sabi may or may not. I don't know. High noon Eastern next Saturday.
I'll join you anytime, JB. It was always fun to be in the media studies classroom.
Yeah. And hey, Mats, I'd love to have you back too.
Yeah. Next weekend, same time.
Same bad time, same bad channel.
Word
Later.
up. Oh, cool. So you're saying you're subscribed to my YouTube as well? Or maybe he subscribed to both of your, or do you have two different?
Yeah, I'm on 2 different channels right now.
Okay, so he's probably talking about that. Matt, I'd love to have you on my subscribe to mine as well.
I'm dropping your Substack in the chat.
Yeah, and YouTube also, since he's a YouTuber. I don't know how much he does Substack.
And I'll look for your YouTube. I'll drop it in there
Thank you.
before I let you go. All right, I'm ending the stream.
Nice. That was cool.